Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Integrated Treatment Services webinar looking at supporting children's mental health and wellbeing during the summer term, so during the term that we're currently in. My name is Lorraine Peterson, and I am currently an educational consultant, but I have been a teacher and a head teacher in primary education for 25 years, and I also was the Chief Executive Officer of NASON, the National Association for Special Educational Needs. So I've been working a lot in the last few months looking at mental health and well-being because, you know, obviously with the current situation we find ourselves in, it is something that we really need to think about. As Carol said, there will be some Q&A session at the end. So if you've got questions, then either keep them to the end, or if you want to put them in the chat box, I can pick them up from chat. Hopefully if there's anything you want to say, we can do all that at the end. So hang on to those. If you could stay on mute, that would be great until such a time as we are going to have those questions. So let's move on. And the first thing I want to just really say is the challenge for schools at this moment in time is it is a real challenge. We know that 1 in 8 children and young people aged between 5 and 19 have a diagnosable mental health condition. That means that their mental health is such that they may not have a diagnosis, but if they went through the processes, through CAMS or through a GP, they would actually have a diagnosable condition. And 1 in 6 young people aged 16 to 24 have symptoms of a common mental disorder, such as depression or an anxiety disorder. And I actually think that although that particular statistic is around the 16 to 24 age group, I actually believe that it's a similar sort of figure right the way down through primary years as well. So in a classroom of 30 children, you may be looking at a sort of five children who have got symptoms of anxiety or stress-related issues at any one time. And following the sort of pandemic that we've been through and are still in, that could be increased significantly. In 2017, which is the last year that we had data for this, suicide was the most common cause of death for both boys and girls aged between 5 and 19, which is a really, stark statistic, really. And we also know that most mental health illnesses often it is girls and women who have a higher prevalence than boys and men. However, when you look at the suicide statistics, it is significantly more men who die by suicide between the ages of sort of 19 and 40. So something in schools that we really need to be careful, and look out for is this isn't just about girls, it's about boys as well, and making sure that we're giving both the opportunity to ask for help where necessary. Less than 1 in 3 children and young people with a diagnosable mental health condition get access to NHS care and treatment, which means that, again, if you look at those 5 or 6 children in your class, there may only be 1 that's actually getting support from NHS, and the others will be in school, and you'll be supporting them in the best way that you can. The big issue for me is that there's just 0.7% of the NHS budget is spent on children's mental health. And given what our NHS have been through over the last 14 months, I would imagine that hasn't been sort of top of their priority. So we really do need to see an increase in the amount of funding that's going into children's mental health as we go forward. As I'm sure you're all aware, the sex and relationships and health education is now statutory. It's a statutory subject. It needs to be taught as part of your PSHE curriculum. And within the health education part of that, very clearly set out mental well-being in both the primary programme and the secondary programme. So again, it is now statutory that we are teaching about mental well-being as part of a statutory curriculum within our schools. At the moment, there's no mandatory training requirement for initial teacher trainees, and there's very limited CPD opportunities for school staff. There is an expectation that all schools have a mental health lead, but that again, that's not statutory or mandatory, and so it is down to each individual school as to whether there is a member of staff that takes on that responsibility. But I would urge schools to have a person, in the same way that you have a SENCO for SEND and you have a DSL for safeguarding. I would urge schools to be thinking about having a mental health lead. And schools and colleges are now expected to be the first responders to all mental health and wellbeing concerns. So, you know, something that we've had to pick up as schools. It was part of the SEND reforms back in 2014. It is meant social, emotional, and mental health is actually a category of need within the SEND code of practice. So it is something that is high on the agenda. We've also had a global pandemic, which I'm going to come back to in a minute, but you know that has increased exponentially the amount of mental health and well-being support that is now needed in schools, not just for children and young people, but also for staff. Last week, which was Mental Health Awareness Week, the DfE did share some good news. And they said that nearly 8,000 schools in England are going to be offered some funding to train a senior mental health lead from their staff in the next academic year. So about 9.5 million will be spent on that. And my understanding is that money will go directly into those schools, and then schools will choose how they access that training. But again, it's the DfE is emphasising that schools should have that senior mental health lead to support the school going forward. So why now? Why are we in, you know, why do we feel that mental health and wellbeing, it has always been on an agenda, but it's much, much higher now? Well, we've had 3 lockdowns over the last 14 months, but schools have remained open throughout all of them. Schools have been supporting their most vulnerable children, their at-risk children, have been trying to, you know, make sure that the remote learning and the classroom learning is worked alongside. And that's had a huge impact on staff mental health and well-being, and it's also had an impact on some children's mental health and well-being as well. The latest attendance figures that came out from the DfE are showing that around about 95% of all primary children are back in school, slightly less in secondary, so 89% in secondary. So we're still seeing, you know, a number of children and young people who are not yet back in school, and that could be because of their anxiety. It could be because of them isolating themselves. It could be because a bubble's collapsed because somebody has contracted the virus. And I think as we look forward to the rest of this summer term, you know, I think we're still going to have all of those issues. And you know, watching the news at lunchtime, and it was talking about, you know, people going on holiday to amber countries during half-term week. And that means that, you know, when they return, they've got to self-isolate for 2 weeks. So you may have children in your school who their parents have planned to take them away for that half-term week, and then they're going to be away for, you know, 2 weeks after that if they do go into that self-isolation. So, you know, I think that we've still got a lot of things to be concerned about, even now when we feel like things have eased a little bit. We know that, you know, the restrictions around masks have been eased. Some bubbles are now mixing with other bubbles, although many schools were still staying to that. But, you know, there are still restrictions there. We're still using, you know, anti-bac on our hands and washing and cleaning down equipment. So we're still, you know, sort of thinking about that. We know that a number of our children who are on the SEN register or got an education, health and care plan saw a reduction in some of their interventions and therapies. And again, how are we making sure in school that those are back on track? We also know that there's been a significant lack of language skill development, and many children have come back into school with language skills that have gone backwards. And again, when we start looking at our September intake and we start thinking about transition, which I'll talk a bit more about later on, those children coming into our nurseries and into our reception, they may not have been out in the big wide world for over a year. They haven't been going to mother and toddler groups. They haven't been going to, stay and play type sessions. So, they may not have the language and the social skills that we would expect them to have as they enter school. We know that children have had much greater limited access to larger spaces, so that we know that there's been a lack of physical activity, a lack of fresh air and outside space. And that can have a huge impact on mental health and well-being. I know at the moment in schools, you are all doing assessments to find out what children have missed, if anything, because there will be some youngsters that have actually not missed a thing. They've really worked hard and they've kept up. But again, the pressure of some of those assessments might be causing some emotional difficulties for some young people. We keep being told that by the middle of June, there will be greater relaxation of everything. But, let's just watch this space, because we really don't know that at the moment. We're all trying to plan for September, and we're trying to work out what's that going to look like. We've been really good at using virtual platforms and remote learning and getting work out to students that can't come into school. That's been a real positive. We need to be thinking about transition, and I will talk a bit more about that later. But those last 3 weeks of term, if the relaxation of the rules it does come about, is going to be crucial to making sure that all children that are transitioning, whether it's from classroom to classroom or from school to school or year group to year group, we're making sure that we're really using those last 3 weeks of term well to make sure that that transition planning goes well. We know that exams and tests have been cancelled, formal ones, but again, I know that there's lots of things going on in schools, and obviously those in GCSE and A-level year, lots of internal assessments going on to grade the youngsters' ability. There's more and more evidence and research coming out now from various organisations on the impact of COVID-19, and many of those research documents and surveys are around mental health and well-being. And I think, we've still got that fear of the unknown. We're still not quite sure where we are. We're still, are concerned that, we know that people have been vaccinated, that program's been fantastic. But, we've got other variants out there. We've got certain areas of the country that are at the moment, severely affected. And, there's still that fear of going forward. So all of those things are going to have an impact on mental health and well-being. And when we actually look at specifically COVID-19 and where we've been in the last 14 months, we've seen a huge increase in the number of people, including children, with depression and anxiety around a whole host of things, including the virus. We've seen loneliness has become quite a big issue, or was when we were in lockdown. Families not being able to meet up, friends not being able to meet up, children that weren't in school not being able to meet their friends. So quite a lot of loneliness that has led to significant, mental health and well-being issues. We have the data that shows that domestic violence and abuse has increased over the last 14 months. So again, we may have children in our settings that are being impacted by their home life and impacted by situations that they find themselves in, which could be domestic violence and abuse. It could be poverty. We know that more young people have been involved in child criminal exploitation. We know that, gangs have been out there knowing that these young people are a little more free if they're not in, if they haven't been in school, and so that exploitation has taken place far more. And again, we may have some youngsters that are struggling at the moment because they've been involved in things that maybe they shouldn't have been. We will have some children that may have moved frequently because they've been into rent arrears or failed to pay mortgage payments, and so housing could become an issue, and then that might mean that children have had to move schools. Educational learning loss will be a consideration for some youngsters, and they will be wondering, how much learning have they lost, especially those that are at those crucial years where they are transitioning to the next stage of their education. I've already mentioned physical activity. Again, physical health and mental health go side by side, and if one's not prolific, then that will affect the other one. Many of our youngsters have had excessive screen time because they've been working on screens at home doing their remote learning, but they also may have been accessing inappropriate sites or inappropriate chat rooms because parents have thought they've been doing their work if they've been in their bedrooms, and parents haven't been keeping an eye on them. And so that, again, they may have been using some of that screen time inappropriately. We know that there's many youngsters that have had an increase in their caring responsibilities. So again, that might be caring for an adult that's been sick during the pandemic, but it may also have been when we were in lockdown and some children weren't in school. They may have had to have been supporting their siblings in home learning, and may feel that they've missed out themselves. And I still think there is a massive concern amongst a lot of people about getting the virus. And again, that can cause, sort of significant mental health issues. So all of those things that, are always there, that it's not just because of COVID, all of those things are important. But because of the last 14 months, all of those things will have escalated. And we need to make sure that we are really supporting our children and young people at this moment in time and as we go through the rest of this summer term, so at least we can get them prepared and get them ready for the start of a new school year in September. So just a brief sort of what is mental health really, and two descriptions here, one from the World Health Organization. So it's a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And then one that came from the CAMS support service, a positive state of mind and body, feeling safe and able to cope with a sense of connection with people, communities, and the wider environment. So we all have mental health, and good mental health is really important. It's equal to good physical health. So people often keep telling us, we need to be physically more active, or get ourselves doing more to keep our physical selves better. We also need to do the same for mental health. So we have to make sure that we are putting into place support and strategies that will help both ourselves and our children and young people to be able to become resilient and to be able to bounce back. So why is it important? Well, it is that state of well-being that we all want to be in. And we all know that we all have off days. We all have days when we don't really want to be doing the things we want to be doing. But because we have that resilience, we have that bounce back ability, we just get on with it. And we may take a bit of time for ourselves. We may do something that will support us, but actually we have the ability to face life's challenges. We are responsive to the emotions of ourselves and others. We can make confident life choices. We can feel good about ourselves and others, and therefore we can learn and confidently, and we can teach confidently. So we can do all the things that we want to do because our mental health, that state of well-being, is in a really good place. In terms of our children and young people, mental health is really, really important from as early age as we can possibly make it, really, because positive mental health will ensure that our children develop psychologically, emotionally, creatively, intellectually, and spiritually. It will make sure that those youngsters are able to develop and sustain mutually satisfying personal relationships. And we know how important relationships are to people's mental health. It will allow our children and young people to enjoy and use solitude, not come and say, I'm bored, what can I do? But actually just be, just accept that at this moment in time, I may not have anything to do, but actually I'm going to enjoy that solitude. I'm going to enjoy that sense of being. It enables them to be able to empathize with others. And therefore that builds those relationships that I mentioned. It enables them to play and learn, develop a sense of right and wrong, and then resolve problems and setbacks and learn from them. So again, it's that bounce back from the things that when something goes wrong, they know that, actually I can learn from that and I can come back and, move forward. So really important for developing, positive mental health in children as young as, sort of reception children. I don't think it's ever too, a child is never too young to start to understand about mental health in the same way they begin to understand about physical health. And so what we have to have, and you're all individuals on here today, but actually mental health has got to be a whole school approach. It's got to be something that's embedded as part of the school culture. And in the same way that, special educational needs are everybody's responsibility, safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. So in the same way should be mental health and well-being in a school. It has to be led by leadership and management. So, needs to be supportive leadership and management. We have to think about the curriculum. We have to think about the positive ethos and environment in which we work. We have to think about student well-being, staff well-being, equally as important. We have to be able to identify the need and then monitor impact on what interventions we might put in place. And we also need to make sure that we're working with parents and families, because parents and families know their children. They know what the needs of their children are. And, in many cases, it may well be that parents and families have got mental health needs, and they might need some support as well as their children. So that would be my my first take, is that we really need to think about this as a whole school approach, but you as individuals can play your part in that. And for me, the first thing that we really need to understand and acknowledge really is we need to know our pupils. We need to have a real understanding of what makes them all tick. And this year has been really difficult because although we went back into school last September after sort of summer holidays and lockdowns before that, and you got to meet your new pupils in your new year group, and you had a really good term, although some may have not been there because of self-isolating, etc. But then following the Christmas holiday, we then went back down into that lockdown, and many of our children and young people didn't come back into school. They were remote learning. And so it's been a really difficult year to really get to know and understand the children that you've been working with, the children you've been teaching. And of course, since March the 8th, we've been back in school. But actually, we've had Easter holiday. We've got half term coming up. So it's been a very, very bitty school year. And knowing and understanding your pupils has probably been, quite difficult for you. But for me, the thing we need to be looking for is any changes in behaviour. So any child that is, in your care who becomes more withdrawn, who but changes the way that they approach things, that may become more challenging. They may become more defiant. They may, get into arguments with their friends in a way that they never would have done before. So it's that observation of their behaviour that would be the first thing that I would say would be the thing we need to do in supporting our children and young people. So, if you start to see changes in their behaviour, it could be it could be other things, but it may well be some difficulties with their mental health and well-being. And by talking to other members of staff that might know those children and young people, that will start to build the picture of whether the behaviours that you're seeing are in fact behaviours that have been seen before, or whether they are things that, are different, they're new, and we haven't seen them before. We might also see a whole host of other things, both physical and emotional signs, which again all result in really changes in behaviour. But a child that is having sort of more panic attacks, or their breathing isn't as standard as it might be. They may be complaining a lot about stomach aches and headaches, or feeling sick, getting very hot or very cold. Their legs are wobbly. There's all sorts of physical signs that might be a sign that a child has got some mental health issue. More likely will be the emotional side, where they might be angry or withdrawn or challenging, I've always said, nervous, panicky, fidgety, frightened. They're full of dread. They've got this impending sense of doom that's out there. They may not be able to cope with some of the daily things that they ordinarily would have coped with. And they're worrying so much that it's difficult to concentrate and or to sleep. So again, you may see children that are much more tired because they're not sleeping at night. So lots of things that you can look out for, and that you might see in a child that is struggling with their mental health. In order for that youngster to be able to tell us what their difficulty is, or how they're feeling, is really about whether they've got the language and the vocabulary to tell us. And something I feel really strongly about is we should be teaching the language that sits around mental health and well-being from day one that child comes into school. So obviously you teach it in that age appropriate way. So you might use something like the emotions bingo that you can see in the top right hand of the corner of the screen, which is just using emojis or pictorials and a word. Or you might actually start to teach, the proper words. So anxiety and depression and stress and suicide and psychosis, again, when it's age appropriate, but giving those children and young people the language so that they can tell us how they are feeling. Because often one of the issues is that children just don't know how to tell us. They block it, they hold it in because they just don't know how to tell us, because they haven't got the language that we need to they need to express themselves and tell us how they're feeling. So teaching the language. And if you look at the new statutory guidance on mental health and well-being that came out, and we should be teaching now, both the primary guidance and the secondary guidance, the language of mental health is really important. That is one of the things that the DfE has put into their documentation, which is about what schools should be doing to make sure that our children have the language and the vocabulary. We also need to be able to ask the questions. So finding out what is, what feelings and emotions this young person has got. You know, why are they feeling sad? Why are they feeling angry? Well, what makes you angry? What makes you sad? What's happened that causes you to feel like that? And again, we have to be very careful about how we question children, and you know, in the same way that if it was a safeguarding issue, we would ask very open questions, and not leading questions. But again, just asking the questions so that young person might just open up a little bit and tell us exactly what it is that is causing them, that particular emotion at this particular time. And if they can do that, if they can talk to us, if they've got the vocabulary and the language to tell us how they're feeling, then we will then be able to do something to help them. If they can't vocalize that, if they can't tell us, then we as practitioners are going to find it really difficult to put things in place to help them. We're nearly at half term now, and we've then got 6 weeks really after half term before the summer holidays. So we've got June and July in which to make sure that we are supporting these children as best we possibly can, so that they are ready for the next stage of their educational journey. So in the next 6 weeks, or sort of once we come back after half term, some of the things that I think we should be thinking about, if you haven't already thought about this, is one, we need to think about how are we teaching the RSH education curriculum. We should be teaching it now. Ofsted are expecting it to be taught now, and they will want to see what the school has done to embed that in the PSHE curriculum. As I say, that there's a whole section within the health education bit on mental health and wellbeing, both primary and secondary. There's also some resources on the Department for Education website about teaching mental health and wellbeing across all phases. So again, you could look at that if you wanted to. Teaching the language, I think, is vital, and making sure that it, obviously it's age appropriate, but making sure that our children have got the sort of language that they need to tell us how they're feeling. Some of the things that we might then start to think about in terms of helping a youngster that is having some anxiety, or is feeling different around their mental health and well-being. We might want to think about focused breathing, and how can we support our children in breathing properly. You'll see on the right on the screen there is a little boy with a breathing ball, I call it. But again, something like that, where the little boy pulls it out when he breathes in and then pushes it back when he breathes out. Or you might do something like, we breathe in for 5, we hold for 4, and we breathe out for 3. So really focused breathing that children can do when they start to feel those anxious moments, when they start to feel that things aren't going as well as they should go, and I don't know what to do about it. So just being able to take a few moments to focus, get everything focused on my breathing and get that back into rhythm before I move on. Blowing bubbles is another really good way of focusing that breathing. Actually, blowing those bubbles will give relief to a youngster that is feeling incredibly anxious. Some children, young people, will feel much happier if they can write stuff down or draw pictures about. And there's a wealth of mental health and wellbeing journals that are now out on the market. If you go to a search engine and you just put mental health journals, you'll find a whole load that you can look at. And again, for really young children, it might be about drawing a picture, but for older young people, it may be about just writing some of their feelings down. So, getting them into supporting those journal writing, or expressing themselves in journals. Lots and lots of schools and classrooms now have what they call the happiness box, and where they've taken a box, shoebox type size, and they have put into that box things that make their children happy. It might be pictures, it might be something that they can play with. It might be a squeezy ball, it could be a piece of cloth. Lots of them will give sensory support for so those youngsters that need some sensory input. Be things in the happiness box. And again, when a youngster starts to feel anxious or starts to feel that they're not coping very well, they could go to the happiness box and get something out and get some sensory stimulation or some regulatory activity that will get them back and ready to work. Many schools are now using mindfulness or yoga or meditation or massage as part of their sort of therapies in school. And again, training our young people to be able to do those type of activities, those type of therapies, to again regulate themselves when they're feeling that their mental health is not in a good place. We might need to ask the children themselves, what activities do they find calming? And it might be sitting quietly in a corner, reading a book. It might be sitting quietly in a corner stroking a cuddly toy. Many schools now have therapy dogs, and again it might be about using the therapy dog, colouring, jigsaws, Lego. There's a whole host of things that our young people will find calming. Some youngsters need some physical activity, so it might be that at a particular time a young person has to just leave the classroom and go and do a walk around the playground, or some physical activity that just gets them back in the right place. We can teach our children to use visualization, so just thinking about a happy place or a person or an activity that makes them really happy, and just sit quietly and visualize that particular aspect of their life. And most of all, the majority of children and young people that have mental ill health just need time. They need time either on their own, or they need time with an adult who is there to support them. And so really important that within our classrooms, within our schools, we have got one sort of safe areas where children can go when they are feeling that their anxiety levels or their mental health is not as good as it should be, and they need to sort of move away and go somewhere, but also that there are adults around who they can go to at those times of need. And where they know where those adults will be, and they'll know that those adults will be able to help them. So time is really, really important for a young person that is experiencing some sort of mental ill health issues. I just want to mention now transition, because we are coming up to one of the most difficult times for many young people in their educational life. And transition can be anything that's around that period of change, when a child moves to a different place. And that could be actually coming into school, into nursery. It could be the journey through primary. It could be that really difficult time from primary to secondary. It could even be from secondary to post-16 for older young people. It could just be from class to class. So, a new teacher, a new classroom. So it's not just about moving to a new school. It's just that change that will happen, or does happen, every year in September. For some young people, that moving to a new school is a huge hurdle in that child's life. And if we don't get the transition right, that can have a huge impact on their start of the next stage of their educational journey. So it's really, really important that even though we've got lots of restrictions at the moment, we know that we are putting in everything we possibly can to enable that young person to have the capacity to adapt to the change and learn in those different environments that they will be faced with in September. And as I say, because of where we are at the moment, we're probably only going to have sort of 3 weeks at the end of this term to really think about some face-to-face transition. So just looking at that journey for some youngsters, you know, we've got children and young people who will be coming into school for the first time. If you've got a nursery, they may be coming into your nursery. If not, they'll be coming into reception. As I said to you earlier, they may have been in sort of nurseries, not from outside your school, and they have been open, so early years provision. But you know, we have lots of children haven't been going anywhere because they, you know, they're with parents at home, or they're with grandparents at home. But some of the activities that they may have been used to doing with their children or grandchildren have been closed, and so they haven't been able to take their children to those things. So again, thinking around social development and language development for those children coming into school, going to be really big issues this September for some children, not all, but for some. Those youngsters that are just moving classrooms, but again, you know, they're moving classrooms, they're moving to new teachers, they maybe moving to another part of the school if you've got a large school. So how are we going to make sure that the knowledge that we have got currently about our children, young people, we are passing on to the next stage of their educational life? And then we will also have a significant number of children who will be moving schools. And that might be they're starting secondary school, so they're going from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3. But it may be, if you are a separate infant school, they're going to a junior school. If you're a first school, they're going to a middle school. So there can be some real trauma in some of that. And so we need to make sure, both from the receiving school and the school that's, you know, sort of sending them on their way, that we are looking at the next few weeks to really embed the changes and the things that these young people are going to have to face. And then finally, in the top right-hand corner, we've got those children going on to post-16. So have been in school for many years. They won't have done GCSEs. So, you know, they'll have teacher assessment grades. So there may be some issues around that for some of them. And then where are they going to next? And how are we going to make sure that they are supported and helped in the best possible way? So some key principles. This is for the receiving setting, so the school or the college where they're going to. That particular setting needs to think very carefully about accessibility and making sure that they are, you know, the Equality Act 2010 is being embedded in that setting. So those children that have got special needs or have got accessibility issues, they are going to have those needs met. They need to find out about the child and make adaptations and reasonable adjustments for them. Finding out about any specialist support that the child might need when they get to that new school, and making contact with the specialist team. So that might be speech and language therapists, it could be occupational therapists, and again, they could be NHS, they could be private ones. But finding out from those therapists what it is that, you know, what is going to be happening and what is going to be offered now the child is coming into this new school. We need to make as many opportunities as possible to get to know the child. And again, as I say, if restrictions are lifted in those last 3 weeks, actually organising some actual face-to-face visits. I know lots of schools that have virtual 360 sort of tours on their websites, and that they've got lots better. We've got staff that record messages and, you know, say welcome to their children. It might be that our youngsters produce their own pupil profiles. So, you know, the things I like, the things I don't like, and they get passed on. And the staff have the understanding of the individual needs of the children that are coming up into their school or into their classroom, you know, the next year. And they may also want to think about some preparation activities prior to the autumn term. So things that the child and young person and their families might do over the summer to, you know, keep that learning going, so they're ready to learn in the autumn term. In terms of feeder schools, so, you know, the schools passing them on, you need to be sharing as much information as possible with the receiving setting. preparing the child, so addressing their concerns and encouraging them to visit where that's possible, or if not, look at the virtual tours, etc., that are on the website. Work with parent carers. It's a really traumatic time for parent carers as well. And you know, having that good communication, and again, how parents can help child in the time between school and the new setting. And again, you know, working with the feeders, the receiving school, to discuss preparation activities prior to the autumn term, and then finding out, are there any summer school opportunities? So there are going to be a number of secondary schools that will offer summer school opportunities this summer. And again, for children that have got some real concerns, for children with special educational needs, for children who have, you know, sort of mental health issues, and they're worrying a lot about what's going to happen next term. If your high school is offering a summer school, then it might be something that you want to have a conversation with them about, certain children who would benefit greatly from being part of those summer school opportunities. If we get transition right, and this is right across the board, so if we get, whether they're moving to a new classroom, a new teacher, or a new year group, or a new school, if we get this right in the next few weeks, it means that our children and young people come September will be ready to learn, and we will not be spending, hopefully, a considerable amount of time, you know, getting them back into learning. We've done, you know, we've had a whole year of recovery, really. You know, I know lots of schools haven't just done recovery, but we've talked a lot about recovery and children coming back to school and children having to face all of those things that we talked about earlier. We really need to be thinking forward now and thinking that come September, we want all of our children and young people to be in a good place, to be able to come back into school and settle well and learn. And so therefore, we need to make sure that over the rest of this summer term, we're not only supporting those mental health and well-being needs that crop up, but we're also almost preempting any that might occur at the start of the autumn term if we don't put in the right provision in place for transition. So just before I finish, I just want to mention, and on this slide, there is a whole host of mental health charities that are, you know, easy to find. Just put them into a search engine, and all of them offer really good free resources for schools. Many of them have got transition resources, many of them have got starting a new school resources, and many of them have got, you know, post-pandemic resources. So if you have got children or young people who you are concerned about, and you know, you are worried about their mental health and well-being, then please, you know, take a look at some of these websites, because you will find some really good advice and support and strategies that you can use in classrooms, you know, at the moment. So thank you all very much for listening today. If you want anything, you can contact Integrated Treatment Services.